and welcome to My Heart Remembers. As you know, I keep my eyes open for amazing people so we can chat with them here. And this week, I've been seeking to get this person on for quite a while because I've had the opportunity to just sit back and relax and remember how amazing it is to be alive, and a lot of introspection coming from this particular person daily has been quite a blessing. So I wanted to bring this particular person to you, and we've got it. It took a while. This is with us today, a gentleman who has you can find them at meaningfulideas.com, and it is Vivek. Is that correct? Awake. Vivek. Awake.
It's Vivek.
Vivek. Oh,
Yes.
thank you. Okay. Oh my goodness.
Awake Vivek.
That E just doesn't work quite right for me, but
yeah.
Yes. It is so wonderful to have you here. I can't thank you enough, by the way, for the work you do daily.
Well, thank you for saying so. I appreciate it. It's certainly, I'm living my passion. So
let's get into that. Meaningful ideas. So it is, people can take seminars with you, right? Is it privately and in groups? Is that?
Yes, absolutely. So I am a conscious parenting educator. I teach conscious parenting, and I also work privately with parents. And I also have a membership group where parents can come and get weekly support from me and my business partner, colleague, Sujai Johnston. And I also have my Facebook page and the Facebook groups, and I write articles and make videos. I've made I've written about 500 articles on parenting, and have well over 100 videos that I've made on parenting, probably close to 200 at this point. And so it's quite a lot of content that I put out there. And most of it I put out for free because I really just want people to get the information to help them with their lives, to help them connect with their kids. Because, I read so many posts from people who are suffering so much with their kids, struggling so much for their kids.
Oh, and they love them so much.
Yeah, exactly.
And they only want the best for them, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure it can be pretty frustrating to have this small package with great big wills and passions that you don't understand, and they are learning to understand
so much. And then as parents, we have our own trauma, we have our own past, we have our own triggers, we have our own pain points. Sometimes those are conscious, sometimes they're unconscious. And so, but both the conscious and the unconscious ones affect us. Well, and it makes it really challenging.
Can I mention that is one of the things, and I do a mirror for myself when I'm reading your posts that you put out there, and it's a mirror for me to say, well, I'm still a child at heart, and that I don't look in the mirror and see a child, but I feel it. I feel how I'm angry, or I'm frustrated, or I'm, and it's at other people. What?
Right.
Like, what's going on here?
Right.
And these things remind me of the simple ways of looking into myself and having chats with that child in me, for example.
Yeah, for sure. Little Vivek and I have such a close relationship because we've been working on it for so many. We've been working on it for so many years. I can feel his pain inside.
Yeah.
I can feel his need to react to things. Yeah. And lack of safety.
Yeah. And let's face it, that child has really not grown up. The child, say it, little Zena, she's not grown up, man. Yeah. She's like, and I can't rely on her to make decisions. I can acknowledge her suffering.
Yeah.
Or that and it's perceived. It's perceived. And so my personal observations and acknowledgement of these perceived things kind of wipe themselves out when I realize they're there. Right? It's almost like they're washed over with a graceful energy that says, oh, you don't have to carry that anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's a challenging maze to navigate, because
Yeah.
like often we have those moments of clarity, like you mentioned,
Mm.
and then like on the heels of that, our kid will like tell us we're stupid or something, and
Hmm.
they hate us and all the other stuff, and it just comes all back to us, right? I often talk about how life is a series of peaks and valleys,
Yeah.
and we enter the peak. When we climb up to a peak, we have this period where we can see things clearly and we feel more centered, and we can see our kids and beneath the surface of what they're going through, and things are clear. And then we start to go into the next valley, because it almost always happens, because life has cycles to it. And then the valley things are really challenging, and our stuff comes up, and
Mm, yeah.
chaos ensues. And the valley is a place where we can learn a lot to help us get to the next peak. And so I think that cycle is something, when we consciously engage in it, when we are in a valley, we can say, "Oh, I'm in a valley. Okay, what are my valley tools? What are my valley
Oh,
ideas? How
thank
do I
you.
deal with it when I'm in the valley?"
Tools,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. A long time ago, um, I started, I've been doing martial arts my whole life, and
Ah, me
lo-
too.
yeah, I had to move to a more aggressive form.
Mm,
Physically, there's no actual striking. You don't hit the person, but you're trained to do that, and
gotcha.
it's a little more. You are in all of them, but some of them are a little more face to face. And I
Right.
just needed it for my, because I have a lot of energy. I'm like,
I can hear it. I can hear it.
yeah, yeah. So I moved to this new form, and
Yeah.
I had this
Can I ask
dream,
what it is?
Zendokan.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah, if you don't not aware of it, it's not like um, it's not really well known, but
Right.
it is fully a spiritual path,
Mm,
um, as they should be,
yeah.
as they are originally,
Yeah.
right? They're,
Yeah. Yeah.
and yeah. Anyway, I had this dream. I had some wonderful things happen that were very, let's say, supernatural. Would you say that, right?
Mm,
I mean, because
mm.
one was a phone call on the day I started that left a message. And the name on the message was the name of the person who started the form, and he's
Oh.
passed on.
Oh.
Like,
Wow.
I had one of this is a while ago, right? So it's on
Yeah.
my phone machine. There's his
Yeah.
name, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my goodness. Okay, I knew I needed to do this, but I didn't know how much. But
That's a
a
pretty
couple,
clear sign.
yeah, and a couple days before I went to that first session, the current sensei who I was working with came to me in a dream, and it was in the middle of the night, and knocked on my door. He said, "Okay, it's time. Let's go." And I said, "Whoa,
Mm.
wait a second." I said, "I got to get my toolbox."
Mm.
Right.
Interesting.
And he said, "Okay, those tools for the depths, for those real lows and the highs, right? Because
Mm.
both are not really where our truest form of feeling. There's other feelings, and
Sure.
that, yeah. So other than emotions, right? There's feelings.
Mm-hmm.
So I grabbed my toolbox, and of course, it has always been a makeup case.
Mm-hmm.
And the
Okay.
reason for it is it's got lots of space to put tools in, and as
Mm.
soon as you open it, there's a mirror.
Mm. I like that very much.
Yeah. So I went and grabbed it, and the one I had a crack in it, and I'm like, oh, okay, I have a new one here,
Mm.
which makes sense. And I'll finish the story because it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
He and I go running along outside of the building, and there's this car, and it's an old, and I don't even remember which one, but it's black, and it's from the 1970s, and it's actually a soft, what's that called when the thing comes down, when you can actually take the roof and put it in the back, convertible.
Ah,
It's that,
yes.
yeah. It's it's just this, like, oh my goodness, I just was very excited about the car as well. And we get in the car and we drive away, and that's it. That was the dream. But the
That's
mirror,
super neat. I love it. And I love the mirror. I love that the mirror came to you in your dream. I actually keep a mirror beside me on my couch. And my couch is like my workspace. I have I call it
oh,
my cave. I've got my table and my computer and my speaker and all my paraphernalia all over the place. And one of the
that
things I
brings
keep,
it. to the physical, right? I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
have that.
exactly.
Well, I do have a makeup case with a mirror in it, but
Right.
okay.
But
Sorry,
for
go on.
years I've kept, no, thank you. For years I kept that mirror beside me, and I try at least, I don't do it every day, but I try and at least once a day to pull that mirror out and look into my eyes
Yeah.
and tell myself that I love myself,
Oh my
because,
goodness.
and that I'm okay. And then I try and reassure myself because, like I support so many parents and I do so much, but at the same
Hmm.
time, I'm not, but at the same time, and at the same time, I'm fully human and I make mistakes every day. I call myself a
Yeah.
mistake making machine,
Oh.
primarily because it's just part of life. I make mistakes every day, and I want to be compassionate to myself for it. I want to have kindness and empathy for myself for those things. I don't want to be
It-
harsh with myself, because
yeah, yeah.
part of the reason for that, of course, is because if my habit pattern of being harsh with myself is, if I have a habit pattern of being harsh with myself, if that's established in me, for sure it's going to come out to my children and other people.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be harsh with my kid, as hard as it is a lot of the time. And we do sometimes, of course,
Yeah,
but I
yeah,
don't
of
want
course,
to.
yeah.
My
Oh
goal
yeah,
is not to.
yeah. Well, that's it. And when you're that's beautiful. Yeah. You don't want to, but I mean there are I mean and as well as parents when you're dealing with them there's a point where you have to say, you have to put your foot down. And I'm sure that when you're addressing issues with people the mirror isn't always a pleasant place to look.
Mm,
That's the whole point of it, is that it brings up these things that you just want to pretend are someone else. That's where the blame comes in. Oh,
right.
you did this to me. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, that did occur out of you. Um, and I'm responsible for my uh, reaction, as you were going to get into reactions, because that's really where we can begin to see ourselves, right?
Right.
If we can step back and say, oh, I just freaked out. Like,
Yeah. That's another mirror, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it always comes up. That's why I said. That's why my case has it right there. I mean,
Right.
as you're saying, your mirror's right there,
Yeah.
and so I mean, let's face it. It we don't ever have to be nice to each other, but my goodness, is it ever a benefit
Right.
to show a level of kindness to yourself and others?
Yeah.
Like it's a benefit to all of us, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And when you don't discount what they're saying either, right? So, but I'm saying you're going to go into this parent thing, and sometimes, it may feel wrong because it's so intense for them, their reaction, right? That,
What do you
oh
mean?
my,
I missed you there.
okay, well,
Intense for
I,
who?
well, for a parent, right? Because you're
Mm,
you're you're saying that children have these reactions, but when the parents are learning about how to deal with children, they're
yeah.
going to hit they're going to hit their child as well,
Right.
and they're going to want to force, and this is where things get really weird, right? Force
Yeah.
your child to take on goals, for example,
Yeah.
that are outside of their personal being. They're
Right.
not related to that child,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
We
know?
impose a lot of our own values and preferences and fears and hopes on our kids, don't we?
I don't have physical children, so I'm told
Ah.
I shouldn't have any say in this.
I Well,
But,
but see, I do know a lot of parents do say that, and I think there's an aspect of that probably makes sense in the
yep.
in the sense of like understanding the intense experience parents go through, and at the same time, parenting is a human relationship, and we all engage in human relationships, right? And I think that's where we can all have a voice, because you were a child and you can say, well, this felt good to me as a child and this didn't feel good to me as a child. Here's something we can examine together. Whether you have children or not, you can still examine that. And I think that's one of the ways that we all learn together, because, a lot of the time when we're parenting, we don't always look at the experience of the child. There's one of the tools. Speaking of tools, I have a lot of tools,
Yeah.
and one of the tools that I teach is called speak listening. And speak listening is when, as you're speaking, you're simultaneously listening from the perspective of your child.
Wow.
So I'm speaking the words, but I'm imagining I'm my child at the same moment, and I'm receiving them at the same time. So I'm kind of splitting my awareness. And I do this all the time with my kid. Whenever I'm talking to her, my kid's 24, by the way. She just turned 24.
I was going to ask, how old are they? Not children.
Yes, yes. My not so child
They
is
are your
24.
children, right?
Yeah.
That never ends.
That's exactly right. My mom is 78 and I'm 52, and she says the same thing.
She's still your mom.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And with my 20, even with my 24-year-old, even now, I was just on the phone with her like an hour ago. When I'm speaking to her, I'm always part of me is listening. How am I landing? How is she receiving me? What's her emotional experience? What's her relational experience? And I really want to feel that, really want to tune into that. So that as I'm speaking, if I say, okay, she's because when we tune in, we can sense, are they closing up? Are they opening? Do they feel more trust and safety with us? Did that make them feel seen, or did that make them feel judged? And then as soon as I notice those things, I adjust. So it's very much like martial arts. You know, in the martial arts,
Oh, yes.
we learn katas, we learn specific movements, but those movements aren't patterns that you keep, because an actual combat situation is fully random, and you have to have all of your tools ready, but they have to come out in responsive to what's happening in the moment. You can't
Yeah.
plan ahead of time. You can't say, well, when he's going to punch with his right hand and then I'm going to block with my left. You can't do that. It has to be a
It's
very
an
much in the moment thing.
instantaneous thing. And
Exactly.
there are things you're taught, about your physical stance, right? Where you're
Yeah.
actually watching the center of them and the outside kind of thing. Because the center is where they're going to
Yes.
move from. Yeah.
Exactly.
But I realized I got, really clearly that what you're saying, and the words I heard for it is responsible compassion. Right. I'd
Mm-hmm.
never heard that before, but I do that. I used to when I was young. I would have trouble sleeping because I was concerned. Like you said, you get concerned about what you've said to someone, whether you've hurt them or whatever. And I would catch myself lecturing. And this is what I got really freaked out about, but happily, that
Mm.
I'm lecturing another person in my head.
Mm.
And I'm like, oh, well, who am I really lecturing?
Yeah.
This, how about I look at this for me and listen to now say this lecture to me and see what it feels like, because what I'm like, who am I really? Yeah. So and I considered that responsible compassion level. That's just the one level. And the other one was to listen when someone's
Mm.
speaking. And that's what you're
Mm.
saying. Right.
Yeah.
And you're
Yeah.
right. In martial arts, you are listening. You're
Definitely.
listening on all levels, right? Because there's,
Yeah.
uh, they're there when you have your opponent, they're right in front of you.
Yeah.
If it's one, right? Because sometimes it's multiple, and frankly, that might be a time to run away. I think that's something that I'm including as my very first. I've been encouraged to start my own martial art form, and I'm working on it. And and it starts with teaching people how to run away and when,
Right. Right.
or at least
Absolutely.
knowing that you can run
Absolutely.
away, man.
Yeah, and that, interestingly enough, is also one of my parenting philosophies: is running away. I
Oh,
I tell parents, as soon as you feel like you're going to yell at your kid, just run, run from
oh
the room,
yeah.
run to the bedroom, scream into the pillow. My pillow when my kid was young, my pillow heard a lot of my screams, because
Oh.
I was so. I mean, I was 28 when my kid was born. I'm 52
Mm.
now, and I was 28 when my kid was born, and I was a broiling mass of tangled web of trauma and unacknowledged emotion and biases and all sorts of stuff,
Mm.
and I had no idea how emotionally triggering and intense being a parent was going to be. I really didn't, and I mean, nobody really told me or prepared me for it.
Yeah.
And I knew about diaper changes, but I didn't know about the emotional impact. And so I found myself yelling, and I was like, "Oh, Vivek, this is not what you want to do." So I developed that. That was like it. That was like my emergency response. As soon as I would notice myself wanting to yell, I'd be like,
Yeah.
"Okay, just run." And it's kind of similar, right? In the martial arts,
Yeah.
obviously, the martial art that I study is ninjutsu,
Mm.
which is the art of the ninja. And unfortunately, I've been to Japan a few times to study with the masters, and Once I spent 2 months there, and I slept in the master's dojo and
Oh,
woke up every
lovely.
morning and cleaned the
Yeah.
dojo in preparation for him to come and teach the classes for the day. And it was like an
Yeah.
amazing experience.
Yeah.
And one of the sayings from the Grand Master Hatsumi Sensei, he says the main goal of the ninja is to win without fighting.
Yes, absolutely. Never draw your sword.
Yeah.
Well, I come from a family who are warriors as well. And
Mm.
that's the first thing we're taught when we're really young
Yeah.
is that you have a sword.
Mm.
And it's very different than what you believe it is. It can be a physical thing, but it's really, that two-edged sword, your tongue.
Yeah.
Like
Mm.
with my tongue, I could hurt people.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, yeah. Okay, so go on. So we're discussing that a child can like bring up all kinds of crazy stuff, and that and we're not really taught how crazy it can make you.
Yeah.
Um, but it's a good thing. I'm using the word crazy because that's it. I mean, what's going on when you're finding yourself enraged at a
Yeah.
little
I might say
baby?
enraged, overwhelmed, intense.
Yeah,
You know,
overwhelmed. Yeah,
yeah. Crazy kind of implies like
it's wrong, but I like
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's not the right word, but
But
making crazy. That's probably better because it's
yeah,
that wild, like where you lose a self awareness and
yeah, yeah, for
and
sure.
yeah, adding a step in there, run away,
Hmm.
is a
Hmm.
good plan.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and we and similarly, it's good to have a lot of different tools around that. It's good to be able to, like, another thing that I have three micro practices that I teach to the parents that I work with. They're micro meditation, micro self compassion, and micro self
mm,
observation.
oh,
The micro meditation is a one breath meditation that you can do anytime throughout the day. And
okay.
I have a video on my YouTube channel, which is also Meaningful Ideas. I have a video on my YouTube channel about the micro meditation. It's when I'm actually doing dishes in the video. And I often do micro meditations when I'm doing dishes. And I'm doing the dishes and I'll just stop for a sec and I'll feel the water running over my hands.
Hmm.
I'll feel my weight against the counter. I'll feel my feet on the ground. And I'll just take one breath. And then I go on about my day. It's not like I have to sit in lotus posture for a half hour. But if I do that a few times throughout the day, I'm giving my consciousness the message, I care about you. I'm giving my consciousness the message, this is a moment to calm down. But I'm also developing the capacity because we build layers with repetition, right? So
Yeah.
I'm developing the capacity in intense moments to be able to go, okay, this is a moment for a breath. Yeah. The second one is the micro self compassion. Micro self compassion is where you have two or three phrases that you kind of know ahead of time you're going to use,
Hmm.
and throughout the day, anytime you notice a self condemning thought, anytime you notice a self hating thought or a judgment wrongness thought,
Yeah.
you just take a moment and say, "Mine are you're doing okay, Vivek. You're doing your best. I love you. This is hard."
Mm.
And I appreciate you. Something like that, right? Do you say it like
I
that?
appreciate you. I appreciate the
Yeah,
challenge.
yeah, exactly, exactly.
Oh my. Okay. And the
And then I
next.
let that go and I keep
Hmm.
going on about my day. But again, I'm
Yeah.
building capacity, I'm building layers. And the third is
Yeah.
the micro self observation. And self observation, which I think is the one that also really helps in those moments where things are getting chaotic and overwhelming and triggering, is where I'm watching myself from outside. I imagine I'm outside my body and I'm seeing myself and I'm seeing my thoughts and I'm seeing the system. I'm seeing my kid. I'm seeing the environment. And it's kind of, it gives me a more of a broader perspective, a more detached perspective. And so the micro self observation is, again, it's a practice. So you can practice that at any moment. So, for example, if I'm picking up a toy off the floor, I'll stop for a sec and I'll just watch myself pick up the toy. I won't just do it, I'll watch myself. And even now I'm talking to you, but now I'm watching myself talk to you just for a moment, right? I
Hmm.
pretend I'm outside. And I lead a meditation for parents every Friday. And we do all three of these. We do the long meditation, and we do a longer self compassion meditation, which takes an hour. We do a longer self observation meditation, which takes an hour. But the micro ones are great because you don't need any extra time; they just fit in. And then when your kid yells at you, and the parents who practice these regularly, it's amazing because when the kid yells at them, all of a sudden, all that practice comes back in that moment, right? And they're like, oh, they take that breath. they see themselves, they give themselves compassion, and all of a sudden they're centered and they're able to look at their kid and go, I see you, kiddo. You're suffering. This is a hard moment for you. I'm here for you. And what a message for a child to receive in a hard moment, rather than, you shouldn't be talking to me that way. That's disrespectful. That doesn't really help the kid. It doesn't help you either, right?
Yeah.
And so in that
Yeah.
moment, when we can just ooze compassion to our kids, it just makes everything so much more connected, everything so much more flow. It increases the trust they have on us to rely on us in difficult moments, rather than turn away. So many young people have to turn away from their parents in difficult moments because they know that they can't rely on them for that considered, connected, non-judgmental response. And that's really
Yeah,
hard. It's really
and
hard for the loving ones.
that's just the one level, right? Because there's also a deeper core in yourself that says, I want this child to actually develop into, right? Because you can get there from these practices. And just so you know, folks, those practices are what we were saying are tools. But using the practice daily changes your value of what you value. And you suddenly, over saying you're talking about the layers, you begin to value this feeling where you can see this other person and you can see yourself in relation, in a sense, to that other person. And your heart goes um, to their developing into having this in their lives in their own way, whatever it may be, right?
For sure.
So then you want to encourage them, but at the same time, encouraging them maybe just like letting go a little and as well at some point.
Yeah.
And I know that from my own parents, where they would, they didn't expect me to pull my bootstraps kind of thing. I'm bad with those idioms, but pull everything up on my own. But they did at the same time. They wanted me to think. Go off, spend some time, think about what you're asking right now, because it's obviously I was someone who asked big questions. I wasn't asking little ones, but
Right.
but at the same time, even little ones are treated. Learn to think for yourself, and let's dialogue about it a bit after, because they trusted me to think.
Yeah. One of
And
my Sorry, go ahead.
understand. Oh, just understand. There's a level of understanding, right?
Yeah.
But value is
Absolutely.
something really important. What do I value in the process you're talking about?
Yeah, for sure.
Any tools help us learn that there's other values that we didn't encounter as children.
Yeah.
That
One of my one-liners is, I didn't teach my kid what to think, I taught them how to think.
yeah, because you want them to.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
want them to learn about who they are and how they relate to the
Yeah.
world. And
And what I do is I say, let's think together.
yeah,
I say, here's how we can think about it, and here are different aspects of the situation, and here are different influences on the situation, and here are different responses you could possibly have, and how do they feel, and what do you think about it, and what feels right to you, and how does it feel in your body, and how does it feel in your mind and your intuition. What I like to do with young people is I always like to point them back to their own wisdom,
yeah.
without pushing them away. So I want to do it in a way that feels like I'm with them, and I'm guiding them to look at themselves. For example, a few years ago, I was at a dance festival. I'm also a dancer, and and
I have to say that was an area that I studied as well, because yeah, I did jazz, and then moved in and had some blessed with being able to do ballet as well.
Wonderful. I do a dance.
Later on.
That's
Yeah.
wonderful. I do a dance form called contact improv. Have you heard of contact?
No, but no, I haven't. But when I was, I work in sound
Right.
and have, and we call it a spiritual practice, and it is what people would know as improvisational, but it's
Right.
something much deeper than that. And we had people who did dance with us, so they were.
Right.
And there was a really cool experience where I had looked up one day while we were performing It's not, it's praying.
Yeah.
And I saw that the sound, like, cause I'm sitting there with an instrument on my lap and a microphone in front of me. And I looked at the dancers and I couldn't decide, which is beautiful. This is a great moment of, realization of what we're capable of as beings. But I couldn't decide where the music was coming from because it seemed like it was
Mm.
moving out of the dancers or being in.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even describe it, but it was just this, oh, wow. And of course, um, it was an amazing blessing to have that. So I didn't do that dance form, right?
Yeah.
But I did, have worked with people who, joined us
Wonderful.
in that. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I gather there's a similarity. Is there an original teacher who
Yeah.
who
The originator of the form is named Steve Paxton. It was like in the 60s and 70s
Mhm.
it originated, and he actually wanted to press against the hierarchical choreography based nature of most dance,
Yeah.
and said, let's make this a non-hierarchical, no teachers for, I mean, lots of people teach, but no actual authority. He didn't copyright it or patent it or anything. He left it open source.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Of
the
course.
idea behind the dance is that two people come together with no choreography in mind, and they just
Mm,
listen to each other, listen to themselves, and they move together and see what happens.
okay.
It's
Have
entirely
you
a conversation. It's a beautiful, beautiful dance form.
have you heard of Subud?
No, what is that?
Well, um, there are some, you know, there's a practice that they open you, uh, theoretically open you for. I was told by my teachers in the martial art that I was already open, but I should maybe have the opportunity to do this with others.
Mm.
And it's not dance, but I'm telling you it is, right?
Right, right, of course.
The practice.
Yeah,
Right. It's sound and whatnot. So I'm just like, I no, I'm seeing the really unique because
yeah,
I get no connections where um, I opened myself because the universe called me and said,
yeah,
just do this,
right.
just move, and discovered some really incredible things. But one of there's the simplicity of it all is to listen,
Yeah, that's
right?
exactly it. That's
In the
exactly it.
silence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a couple of years ago, I'm at this dance festival in Massachusetts, and it was like an outdoor festival at a very naturey retreat center. And at one point, one of the parents wanted to go to one of the workshops, and they had their 4-year-old, and they asked me if I would look after the 4-year-old for an hour. And most of the people in the dance community know what I do. They know I work with kids and work with parents, and so they're pretty cool about trusting me with their kids because
Yeah.
I have a very good relationship with kids. My sister calls me the child whisperer because kids have such
I
a
love
such an
it.
instant reaction to me. They just love me, and part of the reason for that, of course, is because I respect them so deeply. I hold no authority over them. I
Yeah.
hold no hierarchical power over them. I treat them as equals, which is really hard because that's not what we're taught about kids. But in any
No,
case,
it's the truth though,
yeah,
right?
yeah, it's
Yeah.
absolutely the truth. So I'm hanging out with this 4-year-old, and at one point he said, "I'm hungry. Do you have any food?" And I had a few things with me. I had some chips and I had an apple, and a couple of things. And I said, "Oh, okay. Well, I have this." And he said, "No, I don't want that." And I said, "Well, I have this." He said, "Well, I don't want that." And I said, "Okay, well, let's go to the kitchen." So we went to the kitchen, and I was offering him one thing after the other, and he kept saying, "No, no, 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 no."
Mm-hmm.
Now, a lot of the time when adults interact with kids who do that, it can get very frustrating. And because he's saying he's hungry, I'm offering him everything in the kitchen and he's just saying no. And it seems like
Yeah.
he's being intentionally obstinate, whatever.
Yeah.
So what I did was I said, "Hey, kiddo, you know what I really like about this? I like that every time I suggest something, you listen to your body. What is your body wisdom saying? And you're
Yeah.
saying no because you know it's not what you want and you're honoring yourself. And you're telling me that. It's so great. I really love the way you listen to your body like that. It's so beautiful." And his eyes went wide and he goes, I do listen to my body. I really do. And I said,
Yeah.
yeah. And then he told me this whole story about how, and he said, when I was 2, I didn't listen to my body. And then something happened and I started to listen to my body and I'm learning. And he went on this whole like long journey from his beautiful imagination about it.
And the truth.
And the truth.
Because it's
Well,
not imagining, right? Our body
yeah.
knows what it needs.
Yeah, absolutely. I meant imagining the like the history of how he started learning to listen to his body and everything. It was like
Yeah. Because I mean,
wild adventure he went on.
I mean, because we don't really know when we quit, but we also do know when we realize, it's like I know when you
Yeah,
realize that somebody says something that profound to you,
yeah,
you're like,
exactly.
thank you. I can
Yeah,
see the ties. Yeah, imagining. So yeah.
yeah, and
I'm teasing.
even a 4-year-old, right? Even a 4-year-old had that realization of the truth. He
Well,
felt the truth. He felt the
hmm
empowerment of that, you know. And so this is what I mean by pointing kids towards their own wisdom.
yeah,
And eventually we settled on a granola bar and he was so
yeah.
happy. And I said, that was your body talking to you. And so now this kid will go away from that interaction having the sense that he has a very deep relationship with his body and he can rely on his body wisdom. I remember the next day his mom comes up to me while I was eating, or maybe it was later that day. His mom comes up to me while I was eating, and she gives me this, like, she narrowed her eyes and she gives me the look and she goes, "Can I talk to you, Vivek?" And I said, I got worried, and I was like,
Yeah.
okay, okay, well, okay. So we walked away from the crowd, and I said, what's going on? She goes, "What did you do to my child?" And I was like, what? I got really scared. She goes,
Yeah.
he can't stop talking about you. And then it was the opposite of I'd be scared. He can't stop talking about you and your time together. And he's telling me all the things you talked about. You talked about consent. You talked about science. You talked about his future plans. You talked about emotions. You talked about his body. We only spent an hour together, but because I'm so tuned into kids' wisdom and the way they think and the way that they process, we talked about so many deep things and did it in a way where it really impacted him. It wasn't like an adult telling him what to do. It was two people in a beautiful, excited way exploring ideas together. And this is why I often say parents can have the opportunity to have a learning partnership with their kids rather than being the authority. We can be side by side on this path and learn together. But it requires such a perception shift, a paradigm shift, to think of our kids as side by side rather than us above and them below, because they're kids. They're running around and they poop in their diapers and they throw food all over the place. And you can't, how am I equal to this thing, right? But like you said, it's not just the external behavior; it's the consciousness.
Yeah.
It's the spirit.
Namaste.
That's
Namaste.
exactly right. That's
And
exactly right.
that, of course, is something that is imperative that we learn to grow up. I mean, because if we don't understand that another being is
Mm.
spirit on a physical journey,
Mm.
as well as we are, like I
Yeah.
am and you are, and I really mean understand that
Yeah. Yeah.
it practices help you
Yeah.
understand that. The type you're offering are beautiful for that, to
Yeah.
remind you. And when I first heard the word namaste, I knew it was important to me, and I didn't know what it meant.
Mm.
And I looked it up and I went, but my heart knew. And I went, oh yeah, okay. Um, and the simplicity for those who don't know, because I know it's more complicated, but my spirit bows to your spirit. It acknowledges your spirit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing. And it's a beautiful thing to say to our kids. One of the meditations that I do with the parents on Fridays is, and I've designed 15 meditations that we cycle through
Mm-hmm.
week by week, specifically to work on parenting things, like, so the mind and the emotions, the relationship with the body, self-compassion, self-observation, all these things that under the surface really affect our parenting world. And
Yeah.
um,
And all of our life, right? Because I
in
mean, let's
all of
face
our
it.
life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, like, it's exactly it, because the line really blurs at a certain point. I talk about parenting just because it's my focus, but
Yeah.
all of these things apply to everything in life.
Yeah, well, the stuff you offer online, if people get a look at it, it's valuable to me. I don't have children,
Yeah.
but it's valuable to me, and it's not a huge leap at all. I'm
Yeah.
like we were saying earlier, I know there's a kid in me that has it feels victimized because coming out of the womb was just
Mm.
awful, and
Mm-hmm.
everything around me is awful. You feel that
Mm-hmm.
way, right? You just
Mm-hmm.
feel like you'll
Absolutely.
never be satisfied.
Yeah.
And of course, when you begin to learn, you realize that satisfaction is about where you're focusing, and how you perceive
Yeah.
a situation over the ideals that you
Right.
got about getting satisfaction.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds complicated, but it's a lot simpler than we realize. And there are things in the world that I started the show because I wanted to be able to use the word spirit in it
Mm.
without, no, I'm not going to say without, because it's going to happen without people cringing, right? That's okay. Go ahead and
Mm.
cringe.
Yeah.
It's okay. But at the same time, to offer it to people who have a sense that there is so much more to existence that isn't being perceived, right? Just that simple idea in your head somewhere. This is well, and that makes you want to learn, right? That's
Yeah.
it. That's what it does for me. I better read books.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
I better have all the knowledge. Of course, I mean, let's face it. There are things that our child does, and we'll just use um, greed, for example. We're greedy. Our
Mm.
children are greedy. You watch that part of yourself, and you realize, I want everything now. I want. You hear it. It's scary, right? You're like, I hear myself. That's coming out of me. I want things to be fixed. I want everyone to change for me, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that, of course, is an invaluable uh, activity in ourselves, even, right? So I'm saying your things you offer have been valuable to me, and I know they are for others. So, and they're not a but. I am really excited that this is offered through you to people who have children, and people who need assistance in the
Mm.
process.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Zena. I appreciate that. And I always appreciate your engagements on my posts. I really do.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
One of the meditations that I do is called connecting spirit to spirit with your child.
Ah.
And this is why I brought it up because there's three visualizations that we do for this meditation, and one is we imagine our spirits going into the center of the earth, and we
Mm.
imagine our child's spirit going into the center of the earth, and we merge in the core of the earth, and we feel the earth holding us.
Wow.
And then the second one is where we it's what I call the energy ball, and this is something that I teach families to do together as well as to do as a meditation. And the
Mm-hmm.
energy ball is where you imagine there's an energy ball in the sky of light and love and support.
Mm-hmm.
And then each of us in the family has a micro version of that energy ball in our hearts. And
Yeah.
a beam of energy connects all of us to that energy ball in the sky, and we're all unified there. And so then, as a meditation, I imagine my energy ball in my heart connecting to that, and I imagine the one in the sky, and I imagine my child's heart energy connecting in the sky, and we merge there. And the third one is the ocean. So I do earth, sky, and ocean. And then the third one is the
Lovely.
ocean, where we imagine ourselves waves on the ocean. And then I go from the wave down into the ocean and become the whole ocean. And then I see my child as the wave and see them becoming the ocean. And then we're
Mm.
one ocean together. And in each of those points, we slowly use visualization to work our way to the merging, and then we breathe with our child's spirit. And then the fourth one, once we've had those experiences, we just breathe and feel the unity with our child without an image. And so this meditation is so powerful, so profound. The first time I did this meditation with the parents, one of the parents that was on, her 2-year-old was playing somewhere in the living room,
Mm-hmm.
and on her own, very very peaceful. And
Yeah.
and she had her headphones on, so her kid couldn't hear the meditation. When I started the first visualization into the earth, her kid suddenly looked up, ran over to her, grabbed her, and hugged her. She felt her
Mm-hmm.
immediately. And then
Yeah.
she left and she went off to play again in the next room.
Ah,
And
yeah.
then the second image came up, the second visualization came, because we do one, finish, do the next one. And immediately, as soon as we started it, her kid sensed it and ran into the room to give her a hug. And she's thinking, this has got to be coincidence, right?
Yeah.
And so then her kid leaves, ran off. And then we started the third one like 10 minutes later. And a third time, 3 for 3, her kid ran into the room and just embraced her. And she told me after the meditation, because we always do sharing after the meditation so everyone can share their experience if they want. And she told me, she said, I couldn't. The first one, I thought, oh, that's interesting. The second one, I thought, this has to be coincidence. But 3 out of 3, she was so amazed. Mm-hmm. And she could feel how her kid was feeling, because her perception was different. Like the mom's perception was different. The way she was tuning into herself and her kid under the surface, her kid immediately felt it. 3 out of 3. I was amazed. I tell that story all the time because it was great validation for me.
Well, it's a truth of our existence that is, profoundly radicalized in our culture, where if you have a sense of feeling of another person, you're not even feeling them, but a sense of acknowledging on other levels, right? Because we exist in the air. Our bodies are made of water, and there's some great stuff in Japan to do with how water is like really a cool thing. So where it responds to let us say lighter ideas and lighter sensibilities, right? Because you're allowing these people to taking them to the manifested world we live in. And it's very different than we realize. Our minds say it's hard surfaces. And then when you start really looking, you go, well, no, that's actually just that's more an odd coincidence. I'm joking, but it's true. It's like, what's
the odd coincidence?
Solidness of a desk.
Right.
It's like, that's actually more of a coincidence than your child coming in the room and
right, absolutely,
and hugging you. That's a beautiful example.
Yeah. I love your desk thing. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No, the desk.
I love your desk thing, because that's one of the things that we have always talked about in our house too. We talk about how the physical reality as we experience it, the solidness of the physical reality as we experience it, is really an illusion. Everything is made up of atoms. It's mostly empty space. It's like 99.99% empty space. And we're interacting with electrons, basically, because the outer shell of atoms is all electrons, the neutron and the proton. If you watch WKRP in Cincinnati, you can learn this.
That's one source. It's probably one of the funniest and most fun ones.
You know what I'm talking about, right?
Maybe I probably saw. I know I've seen them all. I don't quite remember this one.
For those who don't know what we're talking about, WKRP in Cincinnati is a show from like the 80s and 90s, I think, and it was about a radio station. And there's this one episode where I love this episode so much. And this is one episode where this one of the DJs used to be in a gang and he got out of it.
Johnny Fever? Is
Venus,
that the one?
Venus Flytrap.
Oh, Venus Flytrap. Oh, yeah. And he's amazing.
And this youth who was in a gang came to the radio station at one point and told him he's quitting school and he's going to, because he's too stupid to be in school, and he's going to join the gang and he's going to go full time. Yeah. And so Venus made it, and he also used to be a teacher too before he became a DJ. So he said, I'll tell you what, I'll bet you that in 1 minute I can teach you everything about the atom, and if you can remember it at the end, then you go back to school. If you can't remember it, you can join the gang. And he said, okay, I'll make that bet. Yeah. And what he did was he made all of the parts of the atom named after different gangs. And so instead of electrons, he called them the elected ones. And he said, but they short form it to electrons. And he said, and there's the pro boys and the new guy and the new kids, and each of them, and they called them neutrons and protons because that was their cool gang names. And then he talked about how they all interacted with each other. And at the end of the story, the kid, well, he wasn't a kid, but like the teen knew all of it. And he was like, oh, yeah, the young man, thank you. And he knew all of it. And he was like, I learned that? I can't believe I learned that. Said, yeah, you're brilliant. Yeah. And he decided to go back to school.
That is so cool. Yeah. Okay, go on.
Thanks. Yeah, and so in our house, we talk about, we always have talked about, I say in our house, meaning, my wife, my daughter and I, one of the ways that we made living fascinating, experiencing life fascinating, was we would look at things like that. So I would say, look around, everything around us looks so different, but it's all made out of the same stuff. It's all electrons. And so even to
Mm.
this day, one of our family things is we'll just suddenly yelled out electrons. And so like I'm scrubbing the dishes and I'm like, oh, this porridge is really not coming off this pot. And I'll go electrons, because it's the reason it's not coming off the pot is the electrons of the porridge and the electrons of the pot are interacting with each other.
Oh my
And so
goodness.
it's one of the ways that we as a family humorously acknowledge the unity behind all the diversity. And we know under the surface that we're also talking about spiritual unity, human consciousness unity, even though we're saying
Mm.
electrons. So it's kind of like our code word for that.
Oh man. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's beautiful to have a dialogue with people in your life. A simple one even. Like words that reflect, the incredible lightness of being that we're missing
Mm.
out on in moments.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, there's a level of it's not acceptable to even think about these things in the world. Which is fine. I mean, that I don't understand um, how we got here, and I don't think I really need to know how we got here, unless it's in the moment, right, where I'm going to
Mm.
be useful. Maybe perhaps for a moment for someone else.
Yeah.
And having tools like you're speaking about and practices is either way to me is the same thing, right?
Yeah,
You
for
have
sure.
is with a guidance like you're doing, because you're doing it together with someone is highly beneficial. It's great you have the chat after, because some of the stuff is so profound, and some of it is so empty, and the person may feel empty and need to know, well, that's empty. It's an emptiness that you can let go of after a
Mm.
meditation. You don't have to,
Mm.
you can chat about those things, right? There's
Yeah.
the one thing that I was offered, and it's part of the warrior's path, was tea time. And tea time, I do a segment on my show every now and then called Tea Time, and it
Mm.
is, yeah. Well, we had it in our home, and it was exactly what you're saying about we're allowing people to speak from, you know, from the electron place, right? In a
Mm-hmm.
playful way, if you wish. You can get really
Yeah.
serious about things, and but the whole point is to do some play, like honest play, while you're
Mm.
sitting down, and there's no attachment necessarily to these ideas or ideals. But it's way more vast than that. Except that one of the important parts is a bit of play. So it's something that wouldn't always happen every day, but it was definitely an option. It was like, oh, let's have some tea, right? So we
Lovely.
gather, yeah. And I'm sure, as you're saying, just having a language between you that expresses that is invaluable.
Yeah.
And
Family
it's
rituals are great, you know?
yeah, and you're not saying that these people have to even believe in these terms, right? Like spirit, right? It's
Right.
not because that's I mean, we could probably spend a good week chatting about the concept of spirit
Yeah.
and maybe not get anywhere to be
Yeah.
able to, maybe not walk away with a little, here's why
Yeah.
that's something to look at.
For sure. It's one
Right?
of the reasons that I use the word consciousness a lot instead of spirit,
Yeah. Yeah.
with the parents I work with, because while I, in my personal practice, am very much, and for like most of my life, I've been very much involved in that, and that's been my path. Specifically as a parent educator, because that's what I'm doing, right? I'm trying to get the families all in working in more harmony with each other, and that's my specific area of sharing, and it kind of came about very organically, through many things. I was been a social justice activist for many years. I've been on my own spiritual path for many years. I have a spiritual teacher that I've followed for close to 30 years now, and so that I meditate, I won't say every day, but almost every day, for the last 30 years. Like that spiritual side is very much a part of who I am. When I talk to parents, I talk more like about consciousness and connection from the earth. and things like that. And then I allow people to frame that in their own paradigm, what makes sense to them, rather than try and
Absolutely.
impose that
Yeah.
paradigm, just like what you're saying.
Yeah. Because there's a language that you've cultivated with your people closest to you.
Right.
And then of course, when you're studying with a teacher or whatever, there's a language that you learn there. It's
Right.
a technical language, really,
Yeah.
is what
Yeah.
it is. And it might not be of value to another person. And what you were trying to do is offer them, value in their language, to understand it in new ways,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because let's face it, it's that what I discovered a long time ago was that I think, and it doesn't necessarily actually mean anything, no matter how meaningful it is in the world, which is shocking to
Mm.
imagine.
Mm.
And so I looked deeper and saw teachers using a language that expressed, and some of them used spirit, they used all kinds of different words, but they were saying something that is much more profound and deep than I was even able to even comprehend, even though it is part of my experience.
Right.
So they're not talking about something that's outside of my capabilities of actually experiencing,
Right.
but they are talking about something that I haven't consciously spent time with yet.
Yeah.
And I can.
Yeah.
I am in this body. I have an opportunity to actually experience something that's more profound than I ever imagined, and it's hard to step back and say, "Okay, I don't know. I think I know," but the reality is I don't. And
Yeah.
there are some beautiful people who've offered me, right? There's books. Like I said, I ran to books, but I found very few when I was young.
Mm-hmm.
Like really, I mean, a couple of yoga books that really
Mm.
kind of, but it was very hard to find books that, in my position as a child,
Yeah.
that did have the depth. Like now I have many of them, and we do live we live on a page in reality where a huge amount, like if somebody wanted to read some of the esoteric stuff that asks you to step back, right? Because
Mm.
it's saying this is you, this is what's happening in you, but sometimes somebody's translated it to, well, you're unworthy to experience that. Well, what does that mean? Right? Now, that means
Mm-hmm.
something, right? But it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
mean that you can't. It just says maybe there's things you need to look at, right? So that's where I was
Mm.
left like, okay, I am not in a condition to experience these things. How do I get there?
Right.
Right. So what questions do I want to ask? And
Mm.
that's where I started. Well, how do I get there? Because these people really have. And I asked about Christ when I was young, because
Mm.
I'd seen pictures where he was glowing and he made other people glow and whatnot. And I'm like, what the heck is this? Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did. Right. And my parents said, well, he is experiencing, and that's where the idea of, oh, you're not worthy, comes in, that this being is already experiencing, the love of the universe that we're all swimming in.
Yeah.
And so and that's what I was told about Christ. So he's a prophet, and there's many more of them.
Yeah. I think we all are, right? I think that's
Oh,
I think that's or we all have the potential to be, because
everyone
it's,
is a teacher.
yeah, we're all waves on the same ocean, and the wave is only ocean. The
Yeah.
wave is nothing but ocean, right?
Yeah.
And the wave is an appearance of the ocean, but it is entirely made up of ocean, just like the table is entirely made up of electrons, And the table doesn't actually exist. It's functional. I use it every day. My jigsaw puzzle that we just finished yesterday is on the table, but the table doesn't exist. The table is electrons, and the jigsaw puzzle is electrons, and the electrons are interacting. It's the same with the waves on the ocean. It's the same with you and I. You're the Xena wave over there. I'm the
Yeah.
Vivek wave over here, but we can still recognize each other's oceanship. I talk about the wave self and the ocean self, and we can interact as waves. And if we interact as waves while holding our mutual oceanship in our consciousness at the same time, it's a beautiful, beautiful experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and the child in us actually kind of fights that. you
Tell me
know,
what you
it,
mean.
well, we figure out that, and we figure out that we could get some form of satisfaction because we're seeking satisfaction of some sort. Not the best word, but a sense of that oneness, right?
Yeah.
So, I recalled at one point that, oh my goodness, I've just turned it around. Like here I am searching these words and I'm like, well, okay, unworthy is the wrong thing. So I need to look at the word different, like allow that to come forward differently as a word, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then and see that, okay, I'm emotionally attached to the idea of worthiness. So I have to step
Mm.
back from that. And
Mm.
then all of a sudden, stepping further back from the ideals I have and allowing allowing my child. I mean, one of the big things is to allow yourself to feel what you're feeling, right? Like,
Absolutely.
and that's how you get this sense of, okay, there's other, but the child, as a child, I thought, okay, I even told myself I'm not talking to the universe anymore. I didn't use those words, but I literally said, I'm not talking to you anymore. I'm not going to listen to you anymore. I'm just, because I was having really strange things. Like I lived in a world for a while as a young girl where I could see everything that was going to happen to people and it would freak me out.
Yeah.
There was a bunch of stuff like that. So I just
Yeah.
told this part of me, right? This holy guardian angel, if you'll call it,
Yeah.
to go away.
Right.
And I don't want to hear another word of you.
Yeah.
And so, of course, I still needed that satisfaction. So I turned it into, well, maybe eggs will do it. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe if I go for a run, that'll do it. Like I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
replace it. Meanwhile, I already had it and I told it to go away. So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is where we talk about the concept of missing your mark. I missed my mark. I had the opportunity, but I was actually even more than missing my mark. I turned away
Mm-hmm.
from this beautiful part of my being that
Yeah.
is available to us all. I mean, there were simple things like I learned that I could walk through the forest and see which plants are actually edible. It's like there's an energy field around them, and
Mm.
that's a human thing. It's not,
Mm-hmm.
that people say, "Well, how did we survive?" Well, we survive because we have that. It's part of
Right.
our. It's one of our natural sensitivities
Yeah.
as a physical human being
Right.
that we've shut down. I mean,
Yeah.
so I had that. I have to say I'm very blessed. I had that to say, okay, somehow I've shut down my actual senses, all of like on, like, because that's a natural sense,
Yeah. Yeah.
as an example. But as a child, and that child is still there with me, right?
Yeah.
It's still like saying, I don't want to hear you, shut up. That's what I'm saying. So there's a
Right.
point where the child wants to push away the
Right.
real thing we need.
Right.
And
Right.
seek it in the material in some way to say,
Mm.
well, there must be satisfaction in this material world. I
Mm-hmm.
must get it tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's a whole dialogue that we could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I totally dig what you're saying. Thank you for explaining, Zena. And I think that's one of the things that is connected to the parenting philosophy I teach is, you know, that that search for the deep self, for the deep knowledge, the deep wisdom, the deep connection.
Yeah.
That is something that is in the mainstream parenting philosophy that is about punishment and consequences and rewards and right and wrong and the wrongness and that whole thing. That paradigm, that relationship, that way of engaging with children as their brains are developing, as their understanding of the world is developing, it actually makes it feel unsafe to engage and explore those deeper parts of ourselves because
Yeah.
it's going to be a messy journey full of peaks and valleys, right? And if our parents pull away from us in the valleys and punish us for the valleys, then the valley is no longer safe, and we can't, and that's why the kid inside of you runs. I don't know you, but I mean, like generally, that's one of the reasons. I say one of the reasons, not the reason, but one of the reasons
Yeah.
that the kid in us runs is because that exploration has not been safe. With my kid and with the philosophy that I teach, we recognize this challenging, messy learning experience as part of life, not the problem to be avoided of life, but it is the point, almost the point, right? Learning about ourselves, learning about the world, exploring reality, exploring our consciousness, exploring relationship. exploring our relationship to others and the earth and the universe and our consciousness. And to actually put those things as parenting priorities is kind of radical, you know. Parenting priorities is usually getting the kid to school on time and making sure they eat and making sure they get their homework done and to be polite. But to put an exploration of your child's own exploration of their consciousness as one of your top parenting priorities is radical. It changes the way you have to look at everything. You can't, if a kid, like for example, if a kid gets angry and throws a plate on the floor and it breaks and they scream at you, and your priority is behavior, then you're going to tell them that what they did is wrong. And even in the gentle parenting world, they would say you can have anger and feel your anger, but you can't throw a plate. But those things are not helping a child explore their consciousness.
Yeah.
They're not helping them explore their relationship to their deep selves. And so if I put that as my priority, then I say, I really appreciate you showing me your feelings and showing me your truth, and I'm here for you. And this plate that you threw, it shows me how you're feeling, and I really appreciate you showing me how you're feeling, because I always want to know how you're feeling. I never mention don't throw the plate. I say, I'm going to clean this up, and if you want to help me out, I would love that. If you don't, that's okay too, and let's talk about this, you know. And then what I've done is I've created this incredible safety for this child to feel their feelings. And then the next time they feel that anger, they won't have to feel they need to throw the plate necessarily. Well, maybe a few times, maybe not the next time, but they won't feel they have to throw the plate to get your attention. They'll be like, okay, this person really, really wants to know my depth. I don't have to fight to get their attention. You know, but sometimes it's not fighting to get the attention either. There's other things too.
Well,
sometimes
I was going to say their sense of humor.
Sometimes it's sense of humor. Sometimes it's lashing out. Sometimes it's an emotional expression. Sometimes it's a sensory thing. But whatever it is, we can still engage with them from that perspective. I see your deep humanity. I see your deep spirit, and I'm here with you. We're two waves on the ocean together.
Yeah.
And it's a totally different way of relating to them.
And there's a long-term burden to you throwing all your plates on the floor for me personally. So perhaps learning something new would be very, beneficial. But that's beautiful, because I noticed a long time ago that children really love to learn, but they also love to open and be in their humor, right?
Yeah.
It's more so than anything else I've ever noticed in the children, my nieces and nephews and children I've met, and that we forget this so often. And I bet you run into that a lot, where parents forget that, it could be a dark sense of humor, but like you're saying, if they aren't experimenting with themselves to find that, well, that dark sense of humor is a little going a little too far, maybe, and then the lighter way of using their humor, which is really important part of existing. I mean, without it, we don't really learn a lot as well. So, something to be encouraged. And children really have a closer connect with that. And,
and unfortunately, as children, like you said, a lot of adults have forgot that. And so they don't make space for that. And so then those kids end up being adults who don't know how to play and don't know how to do that as well. And then it's hard for them to connect their kids. And so it's like cycle after cycle, generation after generation, this keeps happening.
Yeah.
One of the workshops that I did for the membership group, and by the way, let me just plug for a moment that my membership group is where I have a group of parents. Right now, there's about 150 parents, so it's a small group. And it's a smaller group smaller than that even, that's regularly involved in all of the discussions and everything. But it's a paid membership space. You pay a monthly fee. And I do, and I host it with my colleague and friend Sujai. And both of us are run and admin the group with a lovely team, Gentle Parents Unite. So if you go onto Facebook and go to Gentle Parents Unite, that's our Facebook group. And we have an amazing admin team who all have similar philosophy. And we have close to 80,000 members now in this group. It's a big, big group. I think it's probably the biggest of its type on Facebook.
Wow.
And then we have the small offshoot paid membership site that people join when they want to really go deep into the conscious parenting, gentle parenting philosophy.
Yeah.
And so I do a membership. I do a coaching call every Monday night, which is tonight, and a group coaching call. So everybody comes on, and everybody gets about 15 minutes to share something that's happening in their life. And I offer suggestions, and the community offers suggestions.
Wow.
And then Sujai also does a couple of coaching calls during the week. And then I do a live class every Thursday where I talk for an hour or two about a specific subject. And I have about 60, 70 of them right now, all recorded in that group. So the whole video library is available for people. And one of the ones that I did, oh, and I also do the meditations on Friday, like I said. And if you want to join us, please check it out at gentleparentsunite.com/membership.
Okay, so that's for that. And go ahead.
And one of the meditations that I do, one of the classes that I gave once was I did 2 hours on how to reclaim and revitalize your relationship to play. Because so many parents tell me it's so hard for them to play with their kids. So I went through step by step all these different tools and practices that you can do to reanimate, to reconnect with your spirit of play. And it's very much a kind of a disciplined thing. I think of it as play as a discipline because it's so, like you said, it's so deep for kids that the more parents are able to access that part of themselves, the more connection they can have with their kids. And so we talk about practice and modeling and the visualizations and all sorts of different ways of engaging. And one of the things that I do is I like to play with little things. Like, again, using dishes as an example, just yesterday I was doing this. I had filled up this Tupperware with water because I was going to wash it. And when you fill something up all the way to the top and just a little more, the water goes a little higher than, because of surface tension, it goes a little higher than the surface of the thing. And so then I had a colander and I put the colander in the sink. I mean, I just put it in there. I wasn't playing at that point. I was just going to do dishes. But the colander touched the Tupperware and the water that was above the surface started to connect to the colander and started to flow down the colander and did a little spiral at the bottom.
Wow.
And I was watching the spiral, and then it ended when the water went down low. So then I took the tap and I put it on very low and I put it in the Tupperware, which would flow to the top, which would touch the colander and make the spiral. And then it was like a continuous thing. And I just stood there like enjoying playing with the water in the sink. Partially I do that because I enjoy it. Partially I do that because it's part of my practice, so that I have that mindset. So when I'm with my kid, I can point those kind of things out to her. I can engage with those kind of things with her. Little things about life that make it fascinating, because there's so much about life that can be fascinating for us once we learn how to tune into those little moments. I call it SMABO, which stands for Small Moments Affect Big Ones. And that's actually one of the biggest things that I teach with parents is to, yes, the big moments are important when the screaming and the yelling and deciding on school and where you're going to live and all the big things that happen are important, but so much of our relationship with our kids is little moments. When you give them a glass of water, do you just give it to them, or do you say, "I'm so happy for the opportunity to give you this glass of water, kiddo"? It's like so different. And my kid, and if we do that like sincerely, the kids feel us so differently. And we use all the small moments to build connection, to build play, to build trust, to build a co-learning relationship. And I always say
I really love that watching, like observing play is an element of play, just kind of observing something that is a phenomenon.
Yeah.
And so you're talking now, and you're moving into co-learning moments you're talking about, which is doing that with someone else.
Yeah.
Or multiple levels. So you teach people how to play again is what that's really cool.
Totally. It's so liberating.
Doctor had said to me, well, you got PTSD. And I went, oh, well, I appreciate your saying that. Because now I can look deeper into some new exercises or new practices that could help me manage it. And play was one of the things. And he'd said that, you need to let yourself play again, right? Because you're really kind of balled up. And he was very pleased that I wasn't a drug addict, right? Because that's a really quick and easy answer for that play, like replacing it with drugs, right? He was like, "You're alive. You haven't you haven't taken really hard, horrible drugs or different types of things to replace like that, seeking that play." And so he wanted to encourage. They use he's a very special. So he works with people who are only specifically musicians right now. So obviously we play, right? When we do music, it's called playing.
Yeah. It's called that.
Yeah. In the sandbox is what my one friend said.
Yeah.
We got our instruments All right, we're in the sandbox.
That's
Let's
amazing.
play.
That's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah, yeah.
What do you play,
Um,
Zena?
uh, I play multiple instruments. I began with vocals and violin when I was young. Did the traditional orchestral stuff. Really happy I did. It's helped me
Mm.
and my community, so that I'm
Mm.
really into interactions with others musically, because you don't have an orchestra without that.
Right.
And I also, at a fairly young age, realized that I'm a composer, or I I have the ability to actually bring some of the beautiful songs that exist, into physical being for us at times. It's very sacred to me, because
Yeah.
it is a gift. Therefore, I have to honor it as much as I can, and
Yeah.
I do, and it's kind of something that is just part of who I am. So I started very, very young. I was like 8 years old when I started studying,
Wow.
like with the system. I was
Yeah.
already studying it prior to that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's kind of part of who I am. And the
Mm.
violin, the flute, the guitar, vocals. I I I know that sound. I offer something called a sounding, and
Mm.
it's something that is about uh, opening the heart and the voice together. Those
Mm.
chakras,
Yeah. It's
and
all
it's
vibration, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's there. I mean, I'm gonna just say it flat out. That some exercises that each of us have to offer are the same as another one.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
because there are only they. Even though I'm saying there are deep levels that we haven't consciously felt yet, um, they are about being human, right?
Yeah.
We have the ability. So I if people say they can't sing, I say, well, that's not possible.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
like, whether it's socially acceptable the way you sing isn't the issue.
Right. Beautiful. Beautiful. Oh, that touched my heart. Thank you. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's
Okay.
that very judgment, I mean, it's that very judgment that I want to protect kids from.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
won't,
please do.
I want,
And bring it into math, because I am
yeah.
so terrified by these absolutely fantastic people I've met,
Yeah.
and most of them are frightened of math. And that
Yeah.
is something that I'm working on a show, and I should chat with you about it.
Yeah.
It's called that in that you'd make a great guest and part of the show at some point. It's future. Actually, it's not a podcast. It's actually a television show I'm
Neat.
working on. Yeah, yeah, you would be really wonderful to have and involved in some way with it, because I think you'd appreciate it. But for the moment, you already have a huge amount you offer the world. Its service that you offer is just saves me often. Like I say, save me.
No,
It
I'm
has,
so
without
grateful
a
to hear
doubt.
that, Sina. That means so
Yeah,
much to me.
and as well, it's kept me saving me, as in keeping me on my toes.
Yeah.
And I really enjoy that. Some other people might not. So you might be a little shocked by some of the stuff at times, but hey, folks, it's just, it's just beautiful things. You're not being forced to take these ideas
Yeah.
on. Don't worry about it. Yeah. But I highly recommend anyone out there who has been listening and listening in the future to this podcast to take a look at. Let's give them the websites that they can look at.
Thank you. So I do most of my writing on Facebook these days. And my Facebook page is Meaningful Ideas, and I write quite frequently, and I go live quite frequently talking about parenting stuff. And so Facebook is a good one. I'm also Meaningful Ideas on Instagram, and I'm a little less active on Instagram, but I do like Instagram. But my big claim to fame on Instagram is that Alanis Morissette shared one of my parenting sayings a few months ago on Instagram. So
Oh,
that
wonderful.
was my big celebrity connection. I was very happy about that, and I used to listen to her album Jagged Little Pill. Like, it was the only album I listened to back when it came out. I couldn't listen to anything else.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I also
composers have a different sense of being, right?
mm,
You'll
yeah.
like they they enter what the world would call the unreal and bring it back for us, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so it's always, to see someone like yourself offering things. I'm sure she's like, "Thank you."
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay.
Yeah, she's quite
So that's
amazing. And she's a big proponent of conscious parenting too. She speaks out about it quite a bit. So I think that's amazing.
excellent.
And also, like you said before, meaningfulideas.com is my blog, although I haven't really touched it since 2015. In 2015, I made a commitment to write every single day, and I did. And I wrote I have like just about 400 articles on there. And then I kind of switched to Facebook. But and my YouTube channel, which is really. But having said so, they're amazing articles, so it's worth going. And
Yeah, it was worth reading anyway,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I almost was talking
There's no
down
time
about it.
limit
No,
on the work you do
and
when you
then,
offer it. Yeah.
thank you. And then there's YouTube, and my YouTube channel has just over 70 videos on it right now. The conscious parenting videos, and some are 2-minute videos, and some are 2-hour long workshops, right? And everything in between. And it's really worth going to that channel and just listening from the beginning and just listening to everything there, because there's so much information. And I try my best. I really try my best to speak without judgment, with a lot of compassion, because I know how hard parenting is, and I know how much we carry and how heavy it is. And judgment and shame just don't help, right? And so check out my YouTube channel. And Twitter, I never go on Twitter, but I'm also Meaningful Ideas on Twitter.
Okay, but there's also a group that they can get a join that's
Right.
quite
Thank
large.
you. Thank you. So I forgot about that. So there's also the big Facebook group, which is Gentle Parents Unite, which you can find on Facebook. And then there's also the membership group that I mentioned before, where if you want to work with me more personally and intimately on a weekly basis and really deepen your practice, deepen your relationship with yourself and your kids, for that, you can go to gentleparentsunite.com/membership, and you can sign up. There's a 1-week free trial, and then there's a sliding scale, so that, because we want to make it as accessible as possible.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's people out there who I'm sure have are making ends meet and need this,
Exactly.
as we would know, because
Yeah.
there's no finance like what you have in the world or whatever that says you don't perhaps need this, because we
Yeah.
all have tough childhoods. So it's great to
Right.
get the tools to help
Which is
you.
why I put everything
Yeah.
out. Which is why I put almost everything I have. I put it out for free, to the public. Is
Lovely.
working with me personally. Like
Yeah.
in person is different, but all my
Yeah.
videos, all my articles, almost everything is, I've just put it out there because I really want to help people have closer relationships with their kids, so that when their kids are 24, like my kid is, you'll be best friends with them, and they'll still be vulnerable with you, still share their heart with you, still want to spend time with you. And it's one of the most beautiful things. One of my blog posts from 2015 was entitled, "Will your kids still want to hang out with you when they're 18?" And that was one of my guiding principles when I was bringing her up. And a lot of parents are like, "Oh, you're not their friend, you're your parent." I'm like, "No, thank you. That's not what I want. That's old school. That doesn't really work. I want my kid to respect me as a person, and to care about our relationship, and to enjoy our relationship, and for it to be meaningful to them." And it's possible. It's entirely possible. And for
Well,
all
they'll
the
bring that to the world,
exactly.
right? If they're going to bring it to you, they're going to have it in their life,
Yeah.
right? It's going to
Yeah.
be wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I do think the style of
Thank you.
parenting is one of the key ingredients in bringing about world peace. I really do.
Yeah, that's a part of this particular era that
Yeah.
we're in, which
Yeah.
is the new era. I know I don't know everything about it, but I do know that it's supposed to be easier. Like we are going to have more tools, and if you look, to be able to learn
Yeah.
about love and understanding, wisdom, love, understanding.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
It's with us all the time, and it's
sure.
easier to access, apparently.
Yeah.
Well, I cannot thank you enough for. I know that you you chose to take on your service, and I know that the great work requires it, but it's still you still have to choose to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that you've discovered one that is you,
Thank you.
that is, I can't thank you enough for joining us
It's
here.
been a lovely conversation. I've really enjoyed it.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I shall stay in touch, and I will make sure that everyone out there knows. I love people to know, because getting you here means I'm a fan. I'm not a fanatic, but I am. But I'm a fan. Yeah, I'm a
Thank
fan.
you.
So I watch and share what you're doing, and I cannot thank you enough. My heart rejoices in all of this.